With many of the manga trilogies of the past, the direction of the overall story has been clear. Graystrip and Millie were traveling to the clans and would arrive there by the end of their third book. Ravenpaw and Barley would reclaim their home from Blood Clan cats. Sasha would make a decision for herself and her kids to move past her relationship with Tigerstar. For the Skyclan mangas, though, the story between the first two entries was different enough that it's somewhat unclear what this book will bring. We might spend more time on Leafstar's split responsibilities between her clan and motherhood, we might delve more into Soul's struggle to acclimate to Skyclan properly, or we might focus more of our time on the physical aftermath of the flood that came right at the end of the last book. Many of the Skyclan books in general have been more slice-of-life oriented, with a focus on clan dynamics and approaching daily situations, so this isn't necessarily a bad or abnormal thing for them, but it does give you less expectations going in. I suppose that means we'll just have to see how this book treats us. Before we begin, though, this is the manga page I'll be redrawing today, chosen as usual by my patrons. After the Flood was released on April 3rd of 2012, the same day as The Last Hope, less than a month after Hollyleaf's story, and about 4 months after Beyond the Code and The Forgotten Warrior. It's fitting to have this entry fall right at the end of Omen of the Stars, because this book too marks the end of an era, in a much smaller way. I don't know at which stage in the process it was planned, but After the Flood was the final Warriors manga for many years, being essentially replaced by the novellas going forward, as well as being the final material involving modern Skyclan at all for several years. Given that, I wanted to take the time now to thank James L. Barry and Dan Jolie for their work on this series. Given the time it takes me to do these videos and just how many books and years of content come between this and their next involvement in the series, I want to be sure that it is known how much I appreciated and enjoyed their stories. With that being said, this book, like all the mangas before, contains an anonymous Erin Hunter note discussing how the large flood through Skyclan's camp was the inspiration the Erin wanted to build this story around. But it ended up being very realistic in its emotion. Having your home torn apart by a natural disaster, wanting desperately to hold on to both the physical place and the culture you built, and coming into conflict with family and friends who want to give up and move on is a real struggle, and it gave extra significance to her writing. She makes no mention of Soul here, so we'll have to see how much of his emphasis in the story was reduced since the last book. That is, after we check in on the statistics. After the Flood has a total speaking cast of 22 cats, smaller than the previous two Skyclan manga entries, but still about par for the cast sizes of the mangas as a whole. And the top 5 members of that cast have 80% of the lines. Again, the highest of the Skyclan mangas, but on the below average side for all of the mangas. Leafstar and Soul are once again the only characters in the manga with at least 50 lines, but given what we saw at the end of the last book, I think that's to be expected. So let's see what they get up to in this final entry. We open up with a survey of the ravaged camp following the flood, as warriors try to put their dens back together and clear out rubble, rushing their mourning of lichen fur while they fend off the creatures and two legs that they're now vulnerable to. The clan is more serious and hard-working than usual, even including the bouncy apprentices and some of the lazier daylight warriors, and Tangle has paused his extreme grumpiness as he mourns for his lost inmate. Oh, and Harvey Moon appears to be flirting with Mintfur. Make of that what you will. Even Leafstar's kits are helping. They're as energetic and naive as ever, but have also internalized that floods are a normal part of life that could come at any time, which is a very realistic depiction of what happens when kids so young experience a natural disaster. It is, by percentage, already a large part of their lives. Thankfully, with Leafstar's capable skills and Clovertail's assistance, the kits are kept happy and busy as the clan rebuilds camp. Sharpclaw is still a strong deputy too, and he and Cherrytail are expecting kits, which has been causing them to argue more over her workload. He and Leafstar discuss the possibility that the flood was a sign from StarClan. Noting the time that the flood came, Leafstar doesn't think they would have complained about her refusal to make Soul a warrior, but Sharpclaw thinks they may have been complaining or warning against giving Soul a chance in the first place. Speaking of Soul, he has helpfully found some poison ivy leaves to use for nests. Leafstar obviously has to refuse this, which angers Soul despite how politely she spoke. Sharpclaw adds in that he had refused to help clear out their stream, potentially to go off looking for those ivy leaves, and that he hasn't been in Skyclan long enough to learn anything. Leafstar tries to reach out to Soul gently, explaining how much Skyclan could use his help and how it's better to focus on what he knows he can accomplish, or is asked to do by more experienced warriors for now. He doesn't take this well either. Leafstar then goes to ask Echosong for guidance regarding any possible StarClan messages, but she considers the flood to be a matter of chance, a reminder of how precious life is rather than any sort of sign. This is almost more terrifying to Leafstar, as this sort of disaster being normal might convince cats to return to lives as loners or kitty pets. She seeks counsel in her dreams from Spotted Leaf? Really? Why is it always you? Why isn't it Cloudstar or Spiderstar or Brackenheart or Skywatcher talking to her? Anyway, Spotted Leaf says the flood was not a message or punishment, but there is a cat in Skyclan who will bring trouble. Soul, of course. Maybe it's not his destiny to be a warrior. Leafstar doesn't just want to banish him, though, because she truly believes and wants to keep believing that cats can choose who they want to be. Billystorm returns from his two legs to help around camp and discovers Silverthorn, aka barbed wire, among the leaves and debris being cleared out. If two-leg debris was swept down too, that puts the safety of the camp into question. So the kits are left with Clovertail to play with, a careful eye watching over them, while Leafstar offers to show Soul how to actually look for herbs, as he had requested. As we saw in the previous entry, he actually does well when taught explicitly in a one-on-one setting by Leafstar, a cat who trusts his abilities and works with him at his level, not only taking in the information well, without any self-deprecation or frustration, but being able to demonstrate his gained knowledge by confidently locating more of an herb he was learning about. Spotted Leaf's warning about him seems completely off base, except for the fact that he asks again when he's going to be made a warrior. Leafstar tells him that he would need to be assessed, and only after he had learned more about not just hunting and fighting, but the warrior code itself. And, of course, more discomfort is piled onto this as Fallowfern, Patchfoot, and Petalnose come to Leafstar and explain how they aren't sure the gorge is really meant for cats to live in. They've been considering leaving, as just themselves, which would be easier to find a new home for than the full, large clan. They haven't decided quite yet, but they're close. Oh, and Leafstar's kits are also now playing being kitty pets, learning from Billystorm. He apparently told them when Leafstar was away that they could come live with him and his housefolk to keep them safe from any future floods, and even things like Silverthorn in the camp. Leafstar is distressed to hear this, to put it mildly. Billystorm makes a well-reasoned argument that Skyclan is his home, but he has another home, one that would be safer for the kits until they grow up. Between the order Billystorm chose to do this request in and the request itself requiring that he take her kits away from her until they are full grown, Leafstar does not take this well at all. Less so when he says that Leafstar could join them too, considering how cats have been talking about Skyclan maybe breaking up. She tells him to get out. He is not loyal to Skyclan if he wants to take its kits to be kitty pets. She calls him Billy rather than Billystorm and demands once more that he leave. She then tries to get straight back to work to help her clan, but is grieving, and the whole clan sees it. She then has to explain to her kits why they aren't going to the two-leg place as their father told them, and later, when she's calm again, has to speak with Echosong about whether Billystorm may have had a point. To give herself something else to think about, Leafstar assesses Soul, which he is quite excited about, and does remarkably well in. He is distractible and a little clumsy in his execution, but he's progressing and succeeding in each task. He even catches an unfamiliar cat scent that Leafstar missed at first, and tracks it to the two-leg den that Petalnose and Truetooth came from. Soul listens to her intently, taking her advice and orders without issue, and not even bringing up his status as a warrior. It seems he's doing well. Billystorm doesn't come back in the next days, and the kits are starting to get really worried. So Echosong invites Leafstar out for a quick hunt and hangout, which helps her relax for the first time in maybe moons, until she arrives back to hear that her kits vanished. The clan immediately mounts a search, with Sharpclaw leading the charge, but Leafstar also has to consider a possibility that she doesn't really believe, that Billystorm could be responsible. Sharpclaw takes a patrol to his nest that night to confront him, and Leafstar knows that isn't the right way to handle this at all, going out herself to intervene. She helps Billystorm escape in time to confront Sharpclaw directly, and say for certain that he does not have the kits. It's at this point that Billystorm learns the kits are even missing, which Billystorm is quietly upset to not have known before. When they go out alone with Echosong to search the next day, Leafstar and Billystorm talk about what happened, with Leafstar immediately apologizing, and Billystorm saying he could be at fault too. They may have wandered off to look for him. They don't find the kits, but they do find a group of rogues heading towards Skyclan's camp, and Billystorm is able to get them through a shortcut to make it back to camp before the rogues make it. Leafstar takes charge to ready her clan, and they stand united against the intruders, working as one to fight with everything they have to protect their precious home and clanmates. They even make a speech together about the warrior code they live by, and why they won't kill their foes. This fight also makes the warriors realize that they don't want to leave. They care too much about Skyclan. The kits are still gone, though, and in addition to the search parties, the other constant in Skyclan recently has been Sol leaving camp repeatedly for long stretches to search for the kits, hunt, or otherwise, with no results. One day, Leafstar sees Shrewtooth tracking Sol out of camp, and she follows them until she sees Sol visiting and lying to her kits at the abandoned two-leg den Leafstar had showed him. Shrewtooth attacks him immediately, and Sol seems ready to kill him for being, quote, too smart for his own good, for figuring out that he was disguising the kits in his scent with gross leaves. He turns just as easily on the mighty leader, Leafstar, when she joins in and tells Shrewtooth to bring everyone. She pins Sol down, checks on her kit's safety, and then questions Sol as to why he would do any of this. He says he wanted to be a warrior by finding the kits for her, after stealing them himself, to make sure he was taken seriously. He says he was always overlooked, never made a patrol leader, and is scorned because of his kitty pet background. The iconic, or perhaps infamous, panel comes as he stamps his paw and whines that he can be a warrior. This reasoning and behavior convinces Leafstar that he can't actually be a warrior because he has absolutely no understanding of the warrior code and has risked the lives of her kits. He is banished, a sentiment immediately echoed by the rest of Skyclan as they arrive and Sol tries to protest. He also makes a dig at Billystorm specifically for being a daylight warrior, and Billystorm uses that moment to commit to being a Skyclan cat full-time. Sol thinks the warrior code they are all using is useless, and will only serve to weaken them as individuals. He curses all the clans for their foolishness, and leaves. Billystorm asks Leafstar what they'll do if he comes back, and Leafstar simply stands tall with all of her clanmates around her and utters 3 words to end the book. Let him try. This book doesn't have as bombastic a plot or an impact on the fandom as many we've covered recently, and I'll admit that even in my previous reads and rereads of it, it didn't stand out as being particularly special. However, I was surprised to find on this close read that I really did enjoy this story, for some bigger reasons and some smaller ones. I'll start off with the simple one that I really do love a lot of the quiet moments in this book. Skyclan's books in general have all had a strong command of their casts, allowing in a variety of interesting personality types and dynamics that can generate very sweet lines and moments in practice. It makes these books really enjoyable to read, even when the plot isn't especially dense or unique, which for the Skyclan books it often hasn't been. But more importantly, for this particular book, the culture of the clan feeds into the theme. Previous Skyclan entries focused more on the divide of the clan, how the cats came from different backgrounds, had been in the clan for different amounts of time, or were part-time or permanent warriors. Even earlier in this trilogy, the clan getting into spats over daylight warriors was included to cause Leafstar stress in her 2 areas of responsibility. In this book, though, following the flood, the clan is united by that tragedy, and don't get into petty spats much, if ever. A through line in this book is certain cats being worried about or thinking about Skyclan breaking up, but even that feeling is one that pervades all of Skyclan equally, and when they do come together to find Leafstar's kits, fight off the rogues, and confront Sol, they do it as a united front, realizing how much they care about both their home and each other. It's a really special and relieving feeling in this series where cross-clan and out-of-clan xenophobia is so absurdly common. I want to make special mention of Echosong, who really does get to shine in this book. She's always been a level-headed and kind voice of reason for Leafstar to bounce her thoughts off of when she's having trouble making a decision, and that continues here. But with the stress of the flood and Leafstar's fight with Billystorm and her issues with Sol, Echosong takes up an additional role of stepping in for emotional support. Rather than offering advice, she offers time to just hang out with a friend and enjoy being a warrior, rather than worrying about the weight of the world. And the resulting scene between the 2 she-cats has so much easy chemistry and levity, and is a very enjoyable scene to read, despite the short length. In general, I think this version of Leafstar, Echosong, and the firm and impulsive, but also confident and capable Deputy Sharpclaw may be my favorite leadership trio in the series. They all have clear dynamics with each other, work well together, but contrast each other in their strengths and flaws in ways that make it clear how they all help to run the clan. Sharpclaw can step in to give on-the-spot commands or enforcement of commands, while Leafstar spends time thinking over all possible choices, and Echosong has enough patience and distance to provide a different perspective that can help guide both of them on a better path long-term. It's a far cry from Leafstar and Sharpclaw's dynamic in Skyclan's Destiny, for example. Another unique feature this book has is its, well, we'll call it framing device rather than main plot. As Erin mentioned in the note at the front of the book, this book focused a lot on the impact of a natural disaster on a young community. Unlike the forest fire in the first arc, or even the drought in the beginning of Omen of the Stars, Skyclan's flood is coming in the first generation of the clan's existence, which brings a different perspective. The leadership of the clan, while hard-working and dedicated, has split priorities and very little guidance from StarClan. In fact, the only thing the ancestors chose to weigh in on was soul. Meanwhile, the cats of the clan all either joined the clan for the first time themselves, are kits of those cats, or are splitting their time between Skyclan and another home. So between this and their collective knowledge of how Skyclan died out here before, it's easy for them to worry that the work they put into this home isn't going to amount to a lasting clan. As a result, there's a sense of dread hanging over the center section of the book. Even as a reader who knows Skyclan won't break up completely, the threat of some of the background cast leaving is entirely likely, and even worse is Leafstar's own fears that her clanmates' worries over the clan's safety are justified. The natural world has more of an emotional impact on the characters and the reader here than any book, well, I would argue any book since the first arc, and it's a really strong part of the book as a whole. But now it's time to discuss the more controversial bits, the social conflicts that this book is more commonly known for. First is Leafstar's relationship with Billy Storm. They have, shall we say, a disagreement in this book, and I'm going to try breaking it down from both sides so you can make your own judgments before I give mine. On Billy Storm's side, he discovered dangerous two-leg materials hidden in bedding materials around camp after the flood washed everything down, and quickly worried that his kits could get hurt even here, where they're supposed to be safe. It's also noteworthy that the other warriors who were working on clearing those leaves at the time didn't notice the silverthorn, so he couldn't even trust that adults taking care of the kits would always catch it if anything dangerous were to slip through. In order to solve this, he told his kits that they would be coming with him to the two-leg place to live with his housefolk, and planned on keeping them there until they became adults, when they would be more capable of taking care of themselves and the gorge might be safer. He also knew, at the time, that other warriors were talking about breaking off from Skyclan because of the danger, so it wasn't certain that his kits would have a home for the duration of their lives if he left them here. It was even possible that Leafstar could join his home too. Leafstar became enraged when she heard about this, called him disloyal to Skyclan, used his kitty pet rather than Skyclan name, and told him to leave, multiple times. A few days later, after staying away as he'd been asked to, Leafstar busted into his house, took him up on the roof to confront Sharpclaw and a patrol of Skyclan cats, and he learned only then that his kits were missing and cats thought he had stolen them. He chose not to get into a serious discussion with Leafstar until the kits were found, and decided to join Skyclan permanently without further discussion shortly after. On Leafstar's side, she had been working hard to keep her kits safe and happy while also managing her demoralized clan in the wake of the flood, while also managing Soul's training and his ill omen from StarClan. In the midst of this, her kits suddenly start talking about how Billy Storm will be taking them away to live with two legs, something she had never heard him tell her about, let alone ask her about. She tries to stay calm and give herself time to think about what to say to Billy Storm, but he starts up the conversation before she is ready, and she yells at him, especially when he brings up implications of taking the kits away until they're full grown and Skyclan breaking up completely due to being unsafe. The very next day, she expects and wants Billy Storm back again so they can talk it over, but he doesn't appear, and when the kits go missing, as a leader, she has to consider the possibility that he took them, given what he had been planning, even though she doesn't really believe it. She defended him from Sharpclaw as soon as he chose to act on this possibility alone, and apologized for yelling as soon as she had a moment alone with her mate. This plotline is definitely engaging, and it succeeds at creating a very complex dynamic with multifaceted characters each trying their best in a bad situation. It is possible to understand either or both sides of this argument, at least in part, and neither side acted flawlessly. Leafstar was out of line in calling her mate Billy and banishing him, and Billy Storm was out of line in deciding to take the kits away for roughly a year, their entire childhood, without talking to Leafstar. The only issue I have with it is that the background of this conflict emphasizes the general discrepancy throughout warriors and our society between the parental duties of the mother and father of a litter. Billy Storm is by no means an absent father or a poor one, and we're not meant to see him as such. As warriors' dads go, he actually exceeds expectations by playing with them and talking to them sometimes, as well as supporting his wife in her career. However, even with a father we're supposed to find no issue with, the time we see him spend with his kits is completely dwarfed by the time both Leafstar and Clovertail spend with them, even though Leafstar herself has to do double duty as a leader and hands off her kit duties relatively often. It's a sad fact that this discrepancy is counted as normal or even extremely generous on Billy Storm's part in their world and ours, thanks to the expectation that women should have all the responsibility when it comes to offspring, even when that woman is in a more demanding career than her male counterpart. Personally, this fact sours me to Billy Storm's side of the argument, as I find it even more outrageous for him to make a decision for the kids' entire futures without Leafstar's input when he isn't even an equal part of raising them. It makes it difficult for me to appreciate this conflict, even though the writing itself isn't bad at all. But that is a more personal problem in comparison to the final thing we must cover: Soul. I'll say right now that the Soul we see here absolutely isn't the level-headed, conniving, smooth-talking cat that Power of Three and Omen of the Stars wanted us to think he was. He was written inconsistently and somewhat poorly in that arc, making rash decisions and derailing his plans as soon as he'd made them. But the overall impression the writers were attempting to create is definitely more of a competent mastermind than what we ended up with here. Soul is an overeager, very selfish, and impatient cat who wants desperately to be a warrior, or, as we learn here, to get the recognition of being a heroic warrior. But he doesn't have the knowledge, experience, or willingness to learn required to actually become a warrior. If you haven't seen my previous video on Beyond the Code, the second Skyclan manga entry, I would recommend watching it because I'm not going to rehash the entirety of my education lecture here, but I am doubling down on those conclusions. Because Soul spends a substantial portion of this book gracefully accepting Leafstar's teachings when she approaches him at his level, and grows substantially in his abilities in herb finding, hunting, and fighting. He shows interest in the clan's activities and actively wants to participate in clearing out the camp, finding herbs for medicine cats, or even looking for the missing kits, to some extent. Realistically, he absolutely could have become a warrior, even despite his extremely fixed mindset, which is why I find StarClan and Skyclan's immediate dismissal of him so infuriating. But there is absolutely one thing that holds him back, which the book does put emphasis on. Soul has not learned and refuses to learn the warrior code. Now, in this context, what they mean here is that Soul doesn't want to work together with other cats towards a common goal, or consider their wants and needs when taking action. He wants to satisfy his own wants and needs as soon as physically possible, and be honored immediately for his place in Skyclan. And if he doesn't get what he wants as soon as he wants it, he will throw a tantrum, and/or take actions on his own that overall hurt cats around him in the aim of personally being seen as special. His kidnapping of the kits shows off his incredibly childish variety of selfishness, in both how short-sighted and self-centered it is. He wants to bring the kits back in order to be seen as a hero and be made a warrior on the spot, despite being told numerous times that his place as a warrior would come when he had demonstrated all of the necessary skills as a warrior, not after a grand gesture. Moreover, the kits can and do speak about everything they have been through, such as Billy Storm telling them that he was going to take them to the Too Late place. If Soul did successfully rescue the kittens, they would immediately tell their mother that Soul took them to this cool abandoned Too Late place and visited them every day while they were missing. He's not a master manipulator. He's a bratty child who never grew in maturity when he aged physically, which is never as clearly demonstrated as in the famous panel where Soul declares that he can be a warrior. Soul could have been a warrior, but he refused all opportunities to actually become one in the aims of getting himself personal glory instead, and as a result, he ended up with nothing. At the end of the book, they try to hastily force this characterization into motivating Soul to curse all of the clans, but other than finding the warrior code stupid in how it doesn't emphasize personal success, it's really unclear why he would go off to locate a badger, find 4 clans he's never heard of, and act as a fake prophet to convince them to stop believing in Star Clan specifically. And it's even more unclear how he managed to mature enough to appear calm and composed while manipulating these cats, rather than flying off the handle when Firestar turned him away, as his characterization here would have predicted. After the Flood is, overall, an enjoyable book. It has a lot of complex and rich material, and its character arcs and relationships, along with those characters' relations to the natural problems they find themselves in, are unique for warriors and engaging for readers. However, it is very disconnected from the rest of the series, both in how Skyclan in general is disconnected from everything happening in the main series, and how the characterization of its one crossover character has little to nothing to do with the conniving antagonist of the 3rd and 4th arcs. It makes sense, then, that so few fans have read this trilogy. But if you're alright with a standalone story and can ignore your knowledge of main series Soul for a while, I would still say it's worth a read. Next time, though, we'll be heading back into the modern day. Though not for the next main series. We'll actually be visiting another clan entirely, one that has been neglected for quite a long time, when we return for the next episode of our trip through time.